Hey there, everybody. Sorry for a little late start. I was about to get going, and then suddenly the camera didn't want to show up on the computer anymore. So we had to do a little tech figuring at that point. So trying the tracking again today, a little bit different. Tried to change the ratio. My wrist is actually kind of hurting. I went and was with a school outing and I fell and happened to hurt my wrist. So I don't want to do a super long video today. I'm just going to do a little bit more back to the basics. Got a fire going. You can't really see it because it's kind of off screen. But I'm going to light a fire. I'm going to forage out, hopefully mostly an acanthus, or excuse me, not an acanthus leaf, but a Calla Lilly. It's just the season right now. I'm starting to see some green show up and pop. So I want to do some controlled hand foraging and get a piece made. So here we go. Yeah, got my fire going. Last time I was with you guys, I read a poem from John Keats. I really enjoy poetry. I enjoy reading a whole lot. Going to be starting again. I've just decided I'm going to do that today. I want to read Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. I just kind of, it started a couple years ago. I decided that I wanted to start doing some of the classics. So I reread Slaughterhouse-Five. I reread 1984. I did those. Maybe reading dystopian type stuff isn't the greatest idea, especially if you're having some weather affect issues, which maybe I've been having. But the weather's nice today, so might as well start reading something. I do a lot of my reading these days through audiobook. I didn't think I would actually really enjoy audiobooks all that much, but when I was a kid, I would go camping with my dad and my brother. We would go down, take the canoe and head down a river. And I remember listening to the radio stories as we did that. And so that's kind of tapped in with the audiobooks. I get to kind of relive a really happy time that I had with my brother and my dad. So for my Calla Lilies, I start with 1/2 inch round. I'm just gonna do a really blunt taper here, right on the end. I'm hoping that shows up in the screen. I'm gonna pause and take a look at this. It actually looks like it's in there. I do a super blunt taper on this. So as you can see here, not a whole lot to that. I don't want it super pointy because there is, with a Calla Lily, you end up with a little bit of extra shaping after the fact. With a file, that's what I mean. So as I've spoken before, there tends to be a little bit of a delay in the video here. So actually, it looks like it's just a little bit off. When the anvil's just a little bit off screen. So sorry about that. I'll try and what I'll do, I'll shift the anvil this way. That's one of the perks of having a fairly malleable shop, is I can change things around, which is nice when I teach my classes. I can set things up so that people can I can move my anvil out of the way. I can set up multiple anvils, or if my son decides he wants to come out and work for a while. So run my coal. As you guys are part of this, you see I'm trying to change my video setup each and every time. So if it's something that you think I can do better, let me know. Let me know. I'm working on trying not to give you the vocal pauses as much. That was one of my high school speech teacher would have been, or English teacher really. I wasn't in speech classes, but he would mark us down if I said too much, which I'm doing. Anyway, blunt taper here looks like it's going to be back in frame just like we want. So just starting with a 1/2 inch round. Now I'm going to arbitrarily guess a length here. I'm going to guess there. And then I'm going to isolate that material with some good, really heavy blows. Fortunately, I chose the area right where the heat was wearing out. So if you look here, I just stepped that corner off. So I've got a maybe 2 inches of material there that are set aside so that I can use that to draw my acanthus leaf. Or I keep saying acanthus leaf. It's a calla lily. Calla lily. So I used on stepping that off, I used a rounder section on my anvil. So because what I don't want to end up with is really hard shoulder there, because eventually I'm going to start peening and drawing that material way out. And if I've got a hard shoulder there, it's not going to blend very easily. We do have a little lap over when it comes to a calla lily, but not horribly aggressive. I don't want anything super sharp at this point. So we're gonna make sure that little step that I just forged in is a little more pronounced. I'm not gonna take it down to its final thickness right here, stem thickness right now, especially because calla lilies become so fine. They're tapers. I make those really for my candle holders. I make them really, really fine. So I need material. Oh, little shiny there, little not quite burned, but we can save that. There's a lot of forging left to be done on this piece. So there we go. I'm about 5/16 there. That's what I want to see on my thickness. Okay, and now I'm just gonna gently I'm gonna forge kind of, I guess I would call this a reverse taper at this point. I just try and pinch in on the side that's closest to the stem. I don't need to do a whole lot of that because at this material thickness, it's still going to try and resist me. So once I thin that out just a little bit more, then I'll be able to adjust my material to the places that I want. It's yeah, the weather's a lot nicer right now. It's still cold out, but from my window I don't see a single cloud in the sky, so it's a lot nicer right now. At this point, I'm going to switch over and I'm going to use the pien. And I'm going to try and spread this out nice and evenly. My first hits are always aimed right at the middle. And then I start working out from there. It's always that last hit. I get a little bit of a ding there. So you can see it's starting to spread out that way. We got a long ways to go. There's a lot of peen work in making calla lilies. That's one of those things that I like having my German style cross peen hammer. Some other videos out there, you see guys with rounding hammers, and they've got a flat side and then a round side. You're not going to be able to do this with that style of hammer. Now, there are plenty of other tools that a guy can use for doing that. There's some bottom fullers you can put in. You could use various things. Some people just use their power hammers for all of this stuff, which is fine. You know, that's I've said in one of my earlier videos, every blacksmith draws an arbitrary line in the sand for what materials and tools you're going to use. I like having control. And so peening by hand allows me to really focus where I want it to draw out. It also allows me, as one of my mentors has told me, to master the material and master the motif. So this is something where I'm working, it's my control, and I like that. So it's starting to flare out even more and more and more. Sometimes wearing long sleeves is a bad idea in the shop. Sometimes it's a really good idea. If you're doing a lot of forging, you warm up quickly, so the long sleeve isn't that big of a deal. So you can see how much it almost looked like a light bulb at this point that this is growing out. I still want to draw this a lot further out, and I kind of want to bring that taper in just a little bit more to a point. So I can't let the material get too thin before I address that. So now is probably going to be that time. And I'm going to use different aspects of the horn, round it out, and just lighter taps to just move the material ever so slightly towards my point. So I don't have a raging heat here. Slightly back towards myself. Just like that, we got rid of that rounded top. I got a little point there, and as I draw the material away, that point is just going to get more and more pronounced. So this is exactly what I want to see. One problem that people run into when they're working with metal is they try and work the whole thing at one go. And really, you can only work a section that's hot, and you can only work a section in the space of the hammer. So notice I'm spending a little more time out at the tip of the pedal so that I can get this to move in future. In the next heats, as I move back, I can get it to complement the work that I've already done. And there's starting to distort just a little bit. I've got more material on one side than the other. That happens in peening. One of the ways that people control that is they will say that you're supposed to count your blows. So start in the middle, do 3 and then 3 away and 3 towards, something like that. That's never really worked for me because I'd rather engage my eyes and see what I see. If I'm busy counting, then I'm not going to be looking as closely at the details or doing what I call read the chatter, where I look at the hammer marks left in the material, and that tells me if my hammer's hit a little off in any direction. And I can usually come back after that. And that, just that little bit of work right there, knowing that I'm a little thick on one side, has helped me. I'm not even really worried about it. It's nominal at best. I'm maybe at 0.5 mil on this side and 1 mil on this side, so it's still growing at a fairly uniform direction. Now I've peened a lot on one side. I'm going to flip it over just because of the nature of the step off that I did earlier for that, what I call the reverse taper. So now I'm going to try and do another step that's right in line with that, but start drawing the material out, because this is a pretty small petal right now. So I need it to grow not just sideways, but also out. The biggest danger I have at this point is the very end of the Calla Lilly is nice and thin. It's thicker behind that. So in order to get that thick part hot enough to work, I might need to cool off that thinner section. That's why I got my slack tub right here. So one of the things that I really enjoy about being able to work with mild steel is that I can cool a section off in the water, and I don't worry about, am I damaging the material composition of the material? Is it hardening and then it's going to shatter on me? It's mild steel. You can't harden mild steel functionally. I have been contacted somewhat recently by some people who are asking about hardened mild steel, and it's like, oh, we don't talk like that. If it's hardenable, it's not really mild steel. Might be medium steel or something like that. There, cool down that little tip. I could still put that in the vise, whack it with the hammer, and it would bend instead of shatter. Not hardenable. There are some tricks out there. There's this thing called super quench. You put salt and borax and dish detergent in water, and that theoretically is a way that you can harden supposedly mild steels. They say that's making water wetter. I've played with it a little bit. I don't know how much it works though. All right, so finding my end, using the flat right there, the face of the hammer. So now I spread it so that it's starting to grow out. It almost looks like a ginkgo leaf, or like a budding ginkgo leaf, but that's not what we're going for. One of the nice things, again, about being a blacksmith is all of those classes I took in college that are not helpful. I took botany, so I spent a lot of time looking at trees and plants, and then when I get people who want pieces that are inspired by nature, they want a ginkgo leaf or a leaf of a very specific plant, I typically have some frame of reference that I have from my younger years to try and bring it together. As I work a little bit further, I start to rotate the hammer and the piece so that it grows somewhat uniformly. I don't want it to branch out too much. a little bit of like these sharp, I would call these sharp corners for a Calla Lilly. Still really thick down here on the bottom, and I really need to grow it. So I'm gonna just try and stretch it a little bit. When I make these petals, I don't want it super wide. They need to be big enough that they can wrap around, but not so obnoxiously large. Because what I do for these are candle holders, I try and mimic nature as much as possible. And if you've got this giant petal that wraps around, then it's not gonna look like nature. It's gonna be its own thing. So a little bit smaller petal allows me to put what's called a slender taper in there that looks like the stamen of the plant, and it looks way more subtle, way more natural, and can actually be a really elegant either mantelpiece or table setting or something like that. So that's what I usually envision when I make a Calla Lilly candle holder. So here we are, stretched out just a little bit. We're going to make it longer first. Here, we've gained, most of the material has gone to the sides, but I'm still looking to get maybe just a shade longer. Heat starting to transfer down the rod. So spending a lot of time thinking about aesthetics, thinking about natural plant life, and how I can mimic it, how I can copy it stylistically, or can I actually, instead of doing it stylistically, can I do it naturally? Can I make it actually look like nature? Yeah, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep making it thinner and thinner. So again, I can't really tell if I basically have to climb into the camera in order to keep see if I can get the fire in. So it looks like if I stay close, you can just barely see it. That's a 10-second delay. But again, the reference that I was given was I need to do more of this vertical, this reels looking shot. So in order to do that, oh, that looks a lot better. I like what I'm seeing there. So now I got a nice little paddle going on here. I've still got material thickness. I can draw it out maybe just a little bit longer, make it go taller, but I'm going to start spreading it once again. I'm going to work on those corners to see if I can get it to a place where I can wrap it really nicely. The single most irritating thing about this project is once I get that petal forged out, it's so thin it loses heat quickly. So when it comes time to move things around after it's been thinned out to the appropriate thinness, then I start losing time that I can work with it. So you have to strike while the iron's hot, as they say. So one more. All right, so now we're going to go back to peening and we're going to spread this out. Being really mindful that we don't burn it here. That's the other thing that's going to really want to do. Oh yeah. So I never really intended Midweek with a Maker to be a fully instructional video here, but as I'm peening down here on the bottom, one thing that I do is I rotate the piece. I rotate it around so that these little wings at the bottom of the pedal start to come down just a little bit lower than the step off that I did before. That means when I wrap it all together, I shouldn't end up with a little gap there. It should come around really nice and neatly. So that's a little trick. That also works for any integral socket that you're going to try and make. So be it a spearhead, a bodkin, or even just a finial. If you're doing an integral socket, that's something that I do. Sometimes it's a little speculative, like how far do you take it down? And especially if you're going to try and forge weld that, your materials are so thin, you just have to be aware of that and have a little bit of an educated guess. So we're going to try and get just a little more width out of that. Then we'll spend some time cleaning it up. Not too hot. Woohoo! I worked that just a little bit longer probably than I should have, but it's okay. one of the nice things about using the pien is that it focuses all of the pressure so much that it's a really hard hit. And so when you're forging materials, actually, if you watch a video, it's one of those fun videos to watch where somebody gets a bar and they start whacking on it and then they hit it until it glows. That's all because the internal materials are rubbing past each other. It's a friction system right there. So I've actually seen it and done it a number of times where I'm forging on something and I hit it so hard and so fast that it actually heats back up and I get longer to work it. So when I'm peening, that's kind of what's going on. I'll work it a little bit longer because I hit harder and it allows itself to move. But you kind of have to, really have to pay attention to that because it's pretty easy to overdo it. Here we are. We got a nice wide paddle there. I am going to try and draw this center piece just out just a little bit more. So I'm going to peen away. This is one of those things where when I teach, I'm right-handed. I like having my horn go off to my left. Some right-handed people like having it go off to their right. They're allowed to be wrong. That's fine. I find from this position, I just have to turn my hips and I don't have to worry about it. When I turn this way with the horn, it doesn't feel as natural to me. Whoop. Get caught talking. So I'm really concentrating on forging that point out. So I was busy talking and then I burned that just a little bit. So on a non-integral piece, a little bit of crispy, a little bit of that sparking isn't that big of a deal. So I'm going to try and forge that out just a little bit. Where were you guys? You're supposed to be like, hey, no, pay attention to the fire. When one of my mentors, he was quick to point out in the shop, especially when we're in production mode, he said, talk or forge, don't do both. Well, if you guys watch my first midweek with the maker, I didn't talk and got the feedback that I should talk more. So here we are. But so I don't mind that really at all. A lot of that was able to forge out there are some companies out there that you can order blanks, so sheet metal blanks for a Calla Lilly pedal, and they'll have really pronounced swoops right here. And since this is all hand forged, to have it not that pronounced, not that super pointy, I'm okay with that. And knowing how I like to do it, I like to keep everything really, really subtle. This is looking okay. So I'm going to take another heat, and I'm going to switch over from the pedal, or excuse me, I'm going to switch over from the peen, working on the pedal, to just flatten everything out. So these are planishing blows, so I'm looking to smooth all those hammer marks out. Now, this is a judgment call, again, because if you look at, as I'm recording this, it's Wednesday, of course, midweek. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we are 4 days away from Easter. Obviously, that's lilies and calla lilies and such like that. If you look at an actual calla lily, sometimes you'll see striations in that petal. And so if one wanted to leave hammer marks in there for that texture, that's totally fine. The biggest thing to remember when leaving texture, especially hammer texture in a piece, is to be purposeful about it. So if I were to leave the hammer marks, I would make sure that they were in line with the vascular system of the flower. And I got most of those out. I'm not afraid of leaving a few hammer marks in there. One of the books that I have talks about you shouldn't be afraid of showing the process. You know, if there's a hammer mark on there, I really don't care because I use the hammer to make it. That's one of the natures of a fully hand-forged piece. But there's also a difference between forging a piece carefully using controlled hand forging and just hitting it a whole bunch of times, and then you have to clean up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a file and I'm going to try and clean up some of these lines. So one of my other mentors, when he was first taught, was taught that you should never use a file. But obviously I'm using one, so he would be rolling over in his grave just a little bit. Then I had another mentor who told me to file with a vengeance. So try and get this part over with as quickly as possible. So to pronounce that swoop, I used the backside of a half-round bastard file. So I've got that, and I don't care that it's symmetrical or not. I want it kind of close, but it doesn't have to be perfect. The further away from the vise that your filing gets, the more unsupported it is. So that's why the rattle gets so much worse out there. One of the ways that you trick that is instead of going perpendicular to the flat, you actually try and go in line with it. And then the structure of the piece helps to hold it in place. Okay, not looking for perfection. I'm actually going to switch it over to this side because that's more comfortable for me. Okay. So I've done filing all on the outside. I'm going one way, and I've developed a burr on the inside. So I'm just going to take a couple quick strokes. This is not, I'm not looking to remove a lot of material here. I'm actually looking to just take that burr off, or at least make it somewhat manageable. Notice as I'm at the very tip here, I don't know if I'm at the edge of the tracking here, if it's not. Oops, sometimes the tracking just decides that it's done. Nope. Let's do that. Is it going to track again? All right. Sorry about motion sickness. But as I'm over here, I'm working on the very end of the piece. So right here, I'm not filing in to the edge. There's something sharp here, so if it comes off, I could always hurt myself. So when we forge on the when we file on the end, always file away. That's what I'm looking to do. Now I'm on the inside of the step here, so this time I want to take a little bit of care. This is where I can prep myself for making a piece that actually looks alive. And I do that by filing a little more pronounced bevel on this piece. Clean up that burr. Okay, there it is. So another pro tip with a file: you never just set it on a steel piece. You always find a piece of paper, leather, wood, something softer than the file to set it on. So as you see, there's a little bit of a glinting right up here on the top, and that's that bevel that I filed in here, because that's going to end up being my inside, and I want that to look nice. So now I'm ready to actually just kind of wrap this thing up around itself and start working on what's called the frustrum, which is a section of a cone. It's not a true cone because it stops right here down at the bottom. So there's your mathematical term for the day. So I'm making a frustrum here. There are a couple different ways and a couple different tools that one can use in doing this, be it a fuller to work around, or it could be a bic that you work around, or it could be a swedge that you sink into. Typically, I bounce back between both of them. So either a swedge that I work the shape down into, and then a bic that I work it around. So now I worked out all of the crispiness, anything that would at all relate to the slight burning that happened. And now it's all back to clean looking steel. You know what? I want to zoom out. Does the zoom? Yeah, there's supposed to be hand controls on this thing. Let me. I want to zoom way out. How does? Is that? No. All right. We'll do normal tracking. I'm sorry, guys. Thanks for Thanks for joining me for a while, especially as I struggle with figuring out. Yeah, for some reason the camera decided it wanted to do really tight shots, and I wanted to do wide shots so that you can see me as I walk over to the anvil or over by the fire. This whole video processing stuff isn't as I'm a much better blacksmith than I am a videographer. So starting off, I'm actually going to start with the swedge. Since I happen to have a swedge block right here. So we'll start by just sinking this in here and slightly working it around. Now, my swedge block, I haven't spent a whole lot of time cleaning up all of the swedges. I honestly, I think it's kind of a waste of time to just sit there and clean every single swedge and corner and stuff like that. I wait until I'm using it. And is it necessary? So if I'm rough forging and I want a little bit of that texture on there, it works just fine. But some of your swedges will come with really, really aggressive corners and such. So I have rounded some of the corners and I just work around rather than spend a whole lot of time, right? Not knowing if I'm ever going to use that form, I'm just saving my time there. So here we go, just a light heat. Trying to stay right in the middle. I'm just going to tap, 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 let it go down. I'm using the peen here. Nothing too hard. I don't want to leave any hammer marks at this point. Go in. Do not burn it at this point. So that piece I pulled out at a nice dull red color. Was a little resistant, which I actually like a little resistance in this kind of bend because it helps prevent me from going too far. But that was maybe just a little much. So here we are. There's an orange color, and that worked out a lot better. So there I jumped to a different swedge. You can see it's starting to round out really nice. You can see these shoulders are down again, still below that initial step off. So we're looking really good. This is kind of where I want it to be. One thing that does happen as I start curving this, pretty typical for the whole piece to kink over. So I have to take a little bit of time to straighten everything back out. And at this point, I'm heating up the very back. I'm going right where that shoulder actually looks like this. Don't do that. That's going to control the camera. It looks like this. And I want to get those corners to start wrapping around. And then I can decide which one do I want on top because they have to cross over. And a good heat is important here. It also allows that top to kind of stay splayed open. I don't want to close it too tightly. So here we are. Not hitting super hard, but I am just trying to work around, keeping it round. And this is interesting. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but even as I have tried to be really careful about making sure I have those pieces come down, you can still see those shoulders actually moved back up ever so slightly. So not ruining the piece by any means, because I'm still going to forge that down rather aggressively. So back in here again, I'm working on that base because I want that to look really nice. I am going to switch hammers at this point though. This is a perfect opportunity for me to use a rounding hammer. So I don't usually speak very highly of rounding hammers because they allow for really sloppy hammer work. But a nice thing about a rounding hammer, especially on a shape like this, is that I can lay it in my swedge and it'll help to round. I kind of want, I guess I could say, I kind of want some sloppy hammer work at this point to allow it to grow the way that I want it to. Okay, not too much more on that, but you can see that cup has really come out rather nice. Got a little gap there. That does not bother me in the slightest. In fact, for burning candles and stuff, that's a nice wax release area. And I don't know, maybe it'll give it some character later on. My friend who sent me this camera or this microphone, it's actually kind of helpful right now. You can hear as it hits the difference between hitting the piece itself and hitting the swedge block. I want to make sure as I'm working here that I'm not hitting the swedge block, because then I'm not really forming my piece much at all. So get down in there. Looks like I'm going to end up with, I would say, left over right in this situation. Like that. So we're going to heat that up and we're going to switch over to a Bic, and I can go back to my regular forging hammer. Lift with the legs. So this is just a Bic, or sometimes called a bickern. Goes in the hardy hole. Sits in there, and it's a tapered form. This is 4140, so it's nice and hardy. And I just use that for, I don't need my big forging hammer. I can use a small ball peen. Now I make everything nice and graceful. Once those initial curves are there, we just kind of accentuate those. Now you can spend a lot of time trying to make this a perfect frustrum, perfect part of a cone, but I don't really spend all that much time on that. So I got a nice cone looking piece there, but it doesn't really look alive at this point. So we have to make it look more alive. So we're closing up here. I know it's been, again, I try and target for about an hour on these videos, which I've been told is too much. So sorry about that. That's kind of the nature of forging, though. It's not a 1 second job. It's not a 6 minute job. It's it takes time. It takes a lot of time. Not just in the making of the stuff, but in learning how to do all these processes. Oop. So now I'm going to come over to a nice rounded part. Got a piece of coal stuck in there. That's that smoke coming up in my face. Okay. Now I'm starting to get some life back into this piece. So I'm trying to heat up just that very end so that I can start to flare it out. Because if it just comes up straight, blocky, it's not done yet. It's not done yet. It needs to flow just a little bit. So I'm using the peen, the ball peen side of my little guy here to give it some flow in a heavily rounded section of my anvil. Just to make it look nice and alive. And we can bring that down just a little bit into the overlap of the stems. You don't want to do it too much. So right there. Working that around, and you can see I've got a nice lip that's flowing out there. I'm going to take one more heat, just one more, and I'm going to open that up just a little bit more. Because I like that little lip that's come up at the top, but I want it to flow down. I want it to my eye, it looks just a little abrupt at this point. So I want to make it a little more graceful. So I'm going to come over to the horn. And again, to get down in there, I have to use the ball peen. And that, my friends, is what I want to see. So there it is. There's a Calla Lilly forged out entirely by hand. Obviously, I'd take a little less time if I weren't talking the whole time, but this is going to be a really nice piece. It's nice, slender, graceful. So the next steps are going to be forging the taper down this way so that that stem, because if you've seen a Calla Lilly, they're not a ½ inch thick. They're a little bit thinner. So there's plenty of time to draw all this out. But from here on down, it's solid material. It's much easier to work with. So we started with the hard part, work towards the easy part. So that's all we're going to do for today for Midweek with a Maker. I thank you for joining me for a little bit. Hopefully you enjoyed some of the conversation. Give me that like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Upcoming events, I'm going to be posting videos on my Instagram and on my YouTube. I've got some classes that I'm teaching. There's a folk school in Door County, Wisconsin called the Clearing Folk School. I'm going to be teaching classes on making carving knives. I'm going to be teaching classes on making regular everyday carry or hunting knives. On this fall, I'm going to be teaching a class on making axes. So head to theclearing.org, check that out. I'm hoping to have full classes the whole time. you can get that experience. You can experience real midweek with a maker with me up there. Also going to be heading down to Atlanta for the Blade show there. So I filmed a little video for my friends at Hot Shot Oven and Kilns. So I'm hoping I'll be able to link that video as well. So that's what I have for you for Midweek with a Maker, my friends. Head out there into the world, make something of yourself.